Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. We have talked college hoops transfer portal basically every episode since the second week of March when it officially opened. It's not quite closed yet. It's closed. There's still some difference makers in there. Darian Reed is still technically in there. Darion Williams is still technically in there. Desmond Claude, RJ Lewis, on and on. We'll see some of the guys are going through the NBA draft process. Some of them are just in the portal looking for a home. Andrei Stojakovic, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think it's time to at least do the first iteration of college hoops transfer portal winners, understanding that stuff is still going to change into April as the draft deadlines come and go, as the NBA draft process comes and goes. But what I want to do now is go ahead and give my first edition, maybe my only edition, of college hoops transfer portal's biggest winners. Now, a couple caveats before we get started on this list. I do want to go ahead and start by saying a couple things. Is that one, like I said, I still think there's 4, 5, 6 difference makers ahead. Andrei Stojakovic is down to UNC, Illinois, and Stanford. I think he certainly would put North Carolina on a second iteration of this list. Will Wade is still big game hunting. Darian Reed, Darian Williams at the 4. So we're going to do a second version of this list, but this is the first one. And I think the other important thing that I do want to mention, I want to focus on schools that really had major holes to fill, okay? So we're not going to talk about, say, a BYU, who we're going to get to in a minute because BYU had some news over the weekend. BYU, the story of their offseason was not going to be what they did in the portal. It was going to be, could they get Richie Saunders back? Could they get Cabe Keita back? Could they get AJ DeBonce to campus? They did all three. So they did well in the portal, but they didn't have as many holes to fill. It's the same with UConn. UConn only has taken 2 players. They're key players, but I wouldn't call them a winner because I just don't think they had the volume that they needed to fill. Same with Arkansas, same with a few others. So enough nonsense, enough riffraff. Let's get into it. The teams that I believe have been college hoops' biggest portal winners so far. Number 1, in my opinion, I don't want to say there's only one team that you could put here, but they're the most obvious one. How about my boy Rick Pitino and Big Rick Energy, baby? St. John's is number 1 in my transfer portal biggest winners. And listen, I'm not alone. 24/7 Sports has them as the number 1 transfer portal class right now. And it's sort of amazing what he did in the portal. First of all, moved very quickly once the season ended. Bryce Hopkins, we've talked about him, began his career at Kentucky, really blossomed at Providence, unfortunately dealt with some injury issues, tried to come back this year, averaged like 17 points per game this season, but it was only in a couple games played. He ends up taking he ends up taking a red shirt. He's eligible. He immediately adds scoring to a St. John's team that needs it. By the way, makes a very interesting front court with Zubi Ejiofor, who is returning. Beyond him, Josan Sanan, we've talked about him, former 5-star recruit, was at Arizona State, good 3-point shooter, athletic wing. Now he's coming to St. John's. I believe he's actually put his name in the NBA draft process. I believe after a year with Rick Pitino, he is going to be an NBA player, maybe 2 years, but whatever. And so those were the 2 early additions. Then it's about what he has done in the last couple of days, because there was literally, about a 4 or 5 day stretch where they got a commitment every single day. St. John's fans were calling it the Mega Haul, and they largely delivered on that. The big one, we all know, Ian Jackson, former 5-star, comes back to New York City. He's from New York City originally, played at UNC this year. Listen, I know he wasn't perfect at UNC, but guess what? He was a freshman playing in the ACC, averaged 12 points on 41% 3-point shooting. We've been over the fact that at various points he was one of the best players in the ACC. Struggled late. I think he's going to thrive in his second year. Ozias Sellers is a very nice player. He's not going to be great for you, but can get you probably 10, 12 points a game. And if he's your 6th, 7th guy, that's great. Dylan Mitchell, former McDonald's All-American. Now, I don't think he's a scorer as much as kind of a wing defender. Crazy athlete. And then most recently, by the way, Dylan Darling is a player to know. He transferred in from Idaho State, averaged 19 points per game. He's probably going to play the point guard position. And so when I look at St. John's, this is what stands out. This is crazy to me. Just went 31-5, excuse me. Won the Big East regular season. Won the Big East conference tournament. No, it didn't go well in the NCAA tournament. But I'm looking at this roster. This roster is deeper. This roster is a much better shooting team. And as importantly, it is as athletic as last year because, you don't want to sacrifice the athleticism that you had just to bring in more skill and more scoring because we know Patino, he has no patience for a guy that's not an athlete. Go back and look at what he said last year with some of the stuff that he said when things were going sideways. So I love this class. By the way, as always, our Torres on SJU account, Torres on SJU for all your late breaking portal news. We really do appreciate your support. Torres on SJU. By the way, I see the Arizona comment, producer Matt. I see you have that starred. Let's get to that at the end. That ruffled some Torres feathers here, but we'll get to them in a minute. All right. Number 2, most impressive portal class. I'll be honest. Dusty May, to quote the old Shaq meme, Dusty May, I was not familiar with your game. The Michigan Wolverines are number 2 in my biggest portal winners. Okay. So like I said, Dusty May, he's at Florida Atlantic. He likes to put up this whole vibe of, I ride my bike to work and I'm just a normal guy, put my pants on one leg at a time. Well, you are a normal guy that's got a wad of cash and you are throwing it around in the portal. But here's the more important thing, getting good players that are difference makers at the college basketball level. Michigan brought in unbelievable groups of talent. First of all, we're going to get to the really big names in a minute, but I think the piece that is going to be the glue that holds them together is Elliot Cadeau, the point guard from UNC. Listen, I know that it was a 5-star. I know it really worked out. He also did average 10 points, 6 assists, and was a much improved 3-point shooter in the ACC last year. That's not to say that he's ever going to live up to 5-star. He'll never be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. But a guy that averaged 10 points, 6 assists, playing with the dudes that he's going to next year, I think he can be an all Big Ten point guard. I really do. But let's get to the big names. The biggest one, I haven't done official portal player rankings yet. I'll maybe work on them this week. But I will say, Yaxel Lenenberg's the best player that entered the portal as far as I'm concerned this year. We talked about him at the time. I told you, I know of coaching staffs that were literally just refreshing the portal, hoping that he got in, and basically, basically raising funds and putting themselves in position to potentially get him. 18 points, 11 boards per game, 4.5 assists, 2 rebounds, or 2 steals, 2 blocks per game. He was the best player, in my opinion, in the portal. Now, the important part with him, with Yaxel, is he's going through the NBA draft process. He's a little bit older. I believe he's 23. I could be mistaken on that, but 6'9" forward. And I think if he gets the right opportunity, he's going to go pro. Going to start that clock, whatever. But I'll tell you this, if the numbers on Michigan are accurate, he is going to be very handsomely compensated. And I do think even at his age, I think he could improve his draft stock because he is going to thrive in that Dusty May system, kind of in the same role that Danny Wolf was in last year. So you have Yaxel Lenenberg. You have Merez Johnson, a player that I like. We've talked about him. The stats don't blow you away, but he only played about 19 and a half minutes per game this year at Illinois. He was basically a double-double machine if you played him, 28, 30 minutes a game. And then the last one I'll say, Adai Mara, he was a guy that when he came to college basketball was a player that we were talking about as a one-and-done lottery pick. It didn't quite work out that way. It's not to say, though, that he can't still be both a really good college basketball player, but maybe as importantly, a really, 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 really good difference maker at Michigan. So I am so excited to see how this all plays out. But Michigan, to me, listen, St. John's, I think they're a top 5 team going into next year. I think Michigan is as well. Let's keep it going. A team that has certainly been in the headlines the last couple days because of reports about how much they spent, which we'll talk about later in the show. It's the Kentucky Wildcats. Listen, let me just say this, Kentucky fans, I don't care how much you spent. I don't care how much UConn spent. I don't care how much BYU spent. Go get yourself some dogs, and that's exactly what Kentucky did. And the thing with Kentucky, I think I give Mark Pope credit for this. Last year was very aggressive in bringing together an older roster. 7 guys that in theory were out of eligibility after this past year. Now, Kirk Kriisa got another year because he had an unfortunate injury, but you knew you were going to have big swaths of guys to replace. So you knew going in you were going to have to replace basically your entire roster. But what I love about what Mark Pope did was he both replaced the roster, but I think upgraded it as well. Remember, last year doesn't get the job till about April 13th, 14th, somewhere in there. Doesn't get his first commitment till April 22nd. This year was able to be aggressive early. He gets Cam Williams from Tulane, and then it was game on from there. Jalen Lowe, the point guard from Pitt, Mo Diabate, the forward from Alabama, the big one, the big man, Jaden Quaintance, who I think was one of the 2 or 3 best big men in the portal. And he wrapped a few days ago with Denzel Aberdeen. Listen, we've talked about Kentucky so much. I don't know that I need to dive like crazy deep into this class. And we're going to talk about them again because of the rumors about how much they spent. But what I would say with Kentucky is that, to me, what stands out is that Mark Pope not only replaced a lot of players, but I think he fixed a hole in last year's team where I just don't think they were athletic enough. I've said it a million times, but they got on the court late in the season. A couple injuries happen. All of a sudden, you're playing guys you weren't anticipating. You could see the difference with Kentucky and Tennessee in the Sweet 16. You could see the difference with Kentucky and Alabama in the SEC tournament. You can see the difference between Kentucky and Auburn when they played it at Rupp Arena late in the year. And so you needed to upgrade the athleticism. I'm never going to blame a coach for, first year in the SEC, had to put together a roster on the fly, 0 returning players. But I think he has not only put together almost a completely new roster. I know there's still a few returnees, but I think it's a better one top to bottom. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, Otega Owe is the big name. Is he going to is he going to, stay in the draft or not? I assume he comes back, but I love what Mark Pope has done this season. Let's keep it going. Let's stay in the same state. And I've said it. Pat Kelsey, he's another one. I would sit there and say I was not familiar with Pat Kelsey's game before he got to Louisville, okay? And so what stands out to me about Pat Kelsey is, he was a guy that I think kind of sort of got lost in the shuffle this time last year with all of the big coaching changes. He gets hired early. He gets to work. Louisville's a disaster, whatever. And then Mark Pope gets hired. And then Calipari, he's at Arkansas. What does that mean? Musselman's at USC. What does that mean? Who's this Kevin Young guy? And we just forgot about Pat Kelsey. Puts together a great team on the fly last offseason. On top of that, and I think this is the important part, puts together a team that is the second best team in the ACC. I forget if they were the 2 or the 3, but whatever. Would they go 18-2 in the ACC? That's freaking absurd. Okay, let's just get that out of the way. They got screwed by the committee. Should have never been in an 8-9 game, even if it was in Rupp Arena. But I bring it up because the offseason ends, and Pat Kelsey gets to work, and he gets to work early. Change it, completely flips the backcourt. Well, he didn't flip it. He lost Chucky Hepburn. He lost Terrence Edwards. He did a great job. I think he felt like he had to be aggressive early. He got a couple kids on campus and didn't let them leave. The names to know, obviously, Adrian Woolley is a guy. Listen, I thought that he was maybe a little bit underrated. And then I looked at 24/7's rankings, and they have him as like a top 10, top 12 player in the entire portal process. He is a very good player. He's good for this reason, because of the fact that he is from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Alabama wanted him bad, and Louisville was able to get him. This was a player that played at Kennesaw State. Did I just mention that? I forget if I did. But he played at Kennesaw State. A true freshman, by the way. These are stats from a true freshman. 18.5 points, 18.8 points per game, 3.6 assists per game, 5.2 rebounds, 42% three-point shooting. And so he's a guy that is going to step up. He's going to have success, but he is also, in theory, a multi-year player that is going to get better and better as things go on. Also, besides him, Ryan Conwell. I love Ryan Conwell. I was a little worried this time last year about him stepping up from Indiana State to Xavier. He averaged 16 points per game on 41% three-point shooting. I think he's fine. He's going to be a killer. Isaac McNeely, elite three-point shooter, one of the best in the country. He is going to Louisville. So you add those guys in with the guys that are returning, Javon Hadley, Kayshawn Pryor. You bring in Mikal Brown Jr., the kid from Germany. I apologize. I don't know how to say his name, but he is a very good prospect as well. Louisville's a beast, dude. I have it like number 9 in my too early top 25. I might have to reconsider before I drop it later this week. Number 5, I'm going to go a little bit off the radar here with my next portal, winner. I'm going to go with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Okay, so Iowa, don't forget about Iowa. So Iowa, of course, remember, fired Fran McCaffrey. They've kind of just been in the doldrums of college hoops, and they've been fine, but they haven't had the moment. I don't think they've made a Sweet 16 since either 99 or 2000. Never clicked under Fran McCaffrey, even when he had Luka Garza, even when he had the Murray brothers. So they fire him. Ben McCollum, Iowa's native son, comes in, and right away he has quietly put together a very good team. The headline player, of course, is Bennett Sturts, who followed him from Drake. Listen, I think there's going to be questions about, can he translate up to the highest levels of college basketball? Came with Ben McCollum from Northwest Missouri, D2 to Drake, ends up being the Missouri Valley Player of the Year. My guess is if you're going to be the Missouri Valley Player of the Year, you're going to be fine in the Big Ten, average 19 points per game, 42% three-point shooting. A couple other guys from Drake that followed, but I think from there, the big name that I really want to focus on, you can see it on the screen there, Alvaro, I call it Fulgaris. Okay, Alvaro Fulgaris. Okay, so he was a kid that was recruited by Kentucky, recruited by a bunch of different schools. Robert Morris transfer, NEC Player of the Year, originally from Spain. He's a perfect fit for that system. 6'9", 6'10", 14 points per game, 41% three-point shooter. I mean, listen, McCollum's system, everybody's got to be able to pass, dribble, shoot. He can do all three of them. Like I said, 41% three-point shooter from a 6'9", 6'10 guy. That's not bad. The other name that I really like, Brennan Howson, quietly had a good year in a pretty chaotic situation for Kansas State. And so I think this team's going to be really good. I don't know that I'm quite ready yet to say they're in the way too early top 25. But if I was doing like a way too early top 35, I think they're probably in there. They still need a couple pieces, but they're going to be a beast. They're going to be tough in the Big Ten. Big Ten's going to be good next year. Michigan's going to be good. Purdue's going to be good. Indiana, which we'll get into in a half a second, is going to be really good. But Iowa's going to be right there. Don't know if they're going to win the darn thing, but I think they're going to be pretty close. Couple other teams, I'll be quick on these. If you want to call them honorable mention or whatever. First one, Auburn Tigers. I got to give credit. They lose essentially everybody off this team. They're another one. They're like Kentucky, where they built their team very intentionally this past season with a bunch of 5th and 6th year guys, knowing Janai Broom, Chaney Johnson, Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, all these guys were going to run out of eligibility after this year. And I wondered, especially going to the Final Four, like how were they going to be able to, reload, because they had they were a week behind everybody else because they went to the Final Four. Turns out just fine. Keyshawn Hall commits to the program right before the Final Four. He was actually at the Final Four at a bunch of Auburn booster events. Told producer Matt, I think that was like a $1 million appearance that he made at the Final Four, because obviously everybody's paying kids trying to get the money in before the house settlement hits here in the next few weeks. But Keyshawn Hall was the leading scorer this past season in the Big 12 at UCF. He comes in. Elijah Freeman, he's that athletic 6'8" kid that played D2 last year at Lincoln Memorial. Everybody was on him. Tennessee was on him. Kentucky was on him early. It might take a minute, but he can play in the SEC. A couple other nice additions. I really like Keyshawn Murphy, the big man from Mississippi State. Now, listen, I understand that conference to conference, and he's a little bit limited in what he can do. But if you're just going to make him the 5 and tell him go rebound, go block shots, be athletic, I think he'll be successful. So I give Auburn a ton of credit there. Another team that we got to talk about, Indiana Hoosiers, Darren DeVries. I give him so much credit. This is a guy that took over a team. He's kind of this year's John Calipari. He's kind of this year's Mark Pope. Took over a team, had 0 returning players, right? What's the famous John Calipari line? I went to meet with the team. There was no team. That was Darren DeVries this year, okay? Because Darren DeVries takes over. Everybody's out. Listen, I think most of them he probably didn't want back. And I think he did a very good job of filling up this roster so far, and still think he probably has a spot or 2 to go. By the way, as always, make sure you're following our Torres on Indiana account for all your late-breaking news. Torres on Indiana. Shout out to our guy Caleb, who helps run that. As far as the big commitments at Indiana, I really love the Reed Bailey kid. When I do my portal rankings of best players, I think he's like a top 15 guy. 6'10" kid, played at Davidson last year, 18 points, 6 rebounds, 41% three-point shooting. I've said it before. When Davidson hired Steph Curry as an assistant GM, it was with the express intention of, we can't lose guys like Reed Bailey. They lose them anyway, and that's not a knock on Davidson or Indiana or whatever. It's just, it's the new world. He wants to play in the Big Ten. I think he's going to be awesome. You see all these teams now with these stretch 5 guys that can all hit threes. He's going to be great in that system. The other big name there, guy we talked about a ton, Lamar Wilkerson. Yes, I got to take the L. Yes, I thought he was going to Kentucky. Yes, he ends up going to Indiana. 20.5 points per game, 44% shooting from behind the 3-point arc. And then from there, I just think nice. By the way, Tucker DeVries, who of course followed Darren DeVries from West Virginia. played with him at Drake. And so he's a guy that's obviously very familiar, got hurt this year, but he was shooting the crap out of the ball early in the season at West Virginia. Before he got hurt, was averaging 15 points a game on 47% three-point shooting. Only ended up playing 8 games, but when you're shooting 47% from 3 on 7 attempts per game, you know what the heck you're doing. And then what I actually really like about DeVry is that I think he's done a good job these last couple days of really backfilling with role players. I think sometimes we get so caught up in these superstar players that we get tripped up on, who's this guy from this mid-major school? And it's like, not everybody has to be a guy who averages 30 minutes a game. As a matter of fact, it can't be. And so really like the additions of the last couple of days. Florida's Sam Alexis. Remember, Sam Alexis was kind of an important player on the Florida team, had a couple double-doubles earlier in the year, gets hurt, gets kind of, other guys step up in his place. He's at Indiana, but it's proven he can play at the Power 5 level, Power 4 level. Also worth noting, Nick Dorn from Elon, 15 points a game, another three-point shooter. Listen, if he's the best player you sign all offseason, it's probably not great. But the counter to that is if he is a player that you sign, as the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th man on your team, that's actually a very good thing. So like what Indiana did, give them credit. They are certainly in the mix. Oh, by the way, a couple others before we get out of here. Creighton. I think we got to give Creighton credit. They lose Ryan Kalkbrenner. They lose a couple other key players, and I was kind of worried, like, how are you gonna fill those spots? Well, Coach Mack does it again. Coach Mack's swan song, by the way. Alan Huss is in as their lead assistant. He is the coach in waiting, so we don't know if Greg McDermott has a year, 2, 3 years left, but Creighton is certainly in the mix. The big pieces of news there: Owen Freeman, Josh Dix, arguably the 2 best players at Iowa last year. McCaffrey leaves, so they are going to Creighton. I think Creighton right now is the clear 3rd best team in the Big East behind St. John's and UConn, so credit to them. And then the last team, I know I said I wasn't going to focus on teams that didn't have major holes to fill, but I do think UCLA needed some star power, okay? I don't think that, yes, they didn't have as many spots to fill as some of these other places, but if they got a B+ at point guard, I think they're a pretty mid-level team. Well, they got an A+ instead in Donovan Dent. Donovan Dent is a rock star, 21 points per game, 42% three-point shooting, 6 assists per game. By the way, I'm doing these stats from memory at this point. I've talked about these guys so much. I think he was one of the 3 or 4 best players in the portal. I said it at New Mexico this year. He could have played anywhere in college basketball. If he was 6'5" instead of 6'3", not only is he in the NBA, he's a lottery pick probably a year ago. So just a star player. You add him with the guys that they have back. UCLA is in the mix. And lastly, let me just wrap by saying we're going to do an update on this list because, like I said, I think North Carolina has a piece to add. Florida appears to be in good position with Desmond Claude, the USC transfer. What's going to happen, by the way, again, at NC State, at a few of these other places, but those are the biggest portal winners of college hoops so far.